Hi, I'm Angie Breidenbach, and with me today is Miss Brenda Wheeler. She is our Director of English Studies, and she also helps us out with our Australian studies and some of our Scottish studies. And she does a lot of our analysis and skills course mentoring. So what's awesome about what we're going to do today with the International Institute of Genealogical Studies is teach you how to speak on cruises as a genealogist. So Brenda, thank you for being with me today. Can you give us kind of an overview of what it takes to be considered an expert genealogist to go on a cruise and what that means?
To want to go on cruises, you obviously have to have a liking for ships and that way of getting around. But to be for to speak on cruise ships, there are certain things that they expect from you to start with. Some of them will require a video or showing you your presentations. They want you to have previous presentation experience because they want people with the who know all about how to present to an audience. Look professional. If you turn up in daggy jeans and a t-shirt, you are not going to be invited back. They want people who look professional and will show that professionalism when they're talking.
Kind of like we do with our beautiful logo wear.
Absolutely, yes. Um, they will give you feedback, and you work on that feedback to improve your own talks, hopefully. And you've got to accept that not all of the feedback is going to be, "Hey, she's marvelous, we love her." There'll be some that say, "Oh, she was a bit hard to hear. Oh, we couldn't see her presentations," and you've got to work on that and think of the situation that you are in as to how you're going to develop your presentations.
And probably the
Presentations,
type of audience, right, that you're presenting to.
yeah,
Because if
yeah.
you've got a whole bunch of children, it's very different than middle-aged adults, and it's very different than older adults. So,
It's unlikely to be the children. The parents like to get rid of their kids to the kids club and all that sort of thing. If you're on that type of ship, if you're on the well, how can I put this? The higher class ships, you're unlikely to get them paying that much money for children to be there. And some of the ships, in fact, one of the ones I work for, their advertisement is "No kids, no casinos,"
oh,
and that is a big selling point for that cruise line.
are
And
you
so
allowed
there
to say
you've
the
got that's Viking Cruises,
name? Okay.
and I was on a Viking cruise recently actually, and met up with a fellow student who was also presenting on that ship. So there you go. So it's a great way of meeting people. The audience on most of the ships is, yeah, you can have on the more fun type ships, you'll have the younger element, and the more expensive class ships, you'll get older people who then have their own difficulties, perhaps with hearing, etc. So you have to blend the way you talk, not so much your presentations, because you've usually got all of your PowerPoint presentations ready to go, but the way you talk to bring that audience in to what you're speaking about, because frequently you can look at that audience and think, yeah, 50% of those have been dragged along by their spouses, who are the ones that are interested in family history. And you've got to be able to present to everyone to get them engaged. So presentation is a big thing, and you've got to you can't just go with, "Oh yeah, I know all about US genealogy, I'll be fine," because your passenger demographics will be, yes, quite a few Americans, but Canadians, Australians, English, and you've got to be prepared, and Europeans, and you've got to be, yeah, um, clued in to a lot of different genealogical areas to be
Yeah.
able to answer the questions, even if you're presenting for. I tend to try and include in my presentations the US, Canada, England, Australia and New Zealand,
Oh, very
because being in the southern hemisphere, those are the demographics for that type of cruises. There is an age requirement. You've got to be over 18 at least, and a lot of the cruises will allow you to bring a companion to share your cabin at no cost to the companion. All they've got to do is to find their airfares and join you and possibly help out, etc. If you need it. But those companions have to be over 18 as well, and
oh,
in some on some cruise ships over 21. So you can't take. As my granddaughter is very disappointed, she's 17 and can't come along at the moment.
not yet, not yet.
So it's that sort of thing that you've really got to think about when you're doing these cruises. Are you going to do it with a companion? Are you going to do it on your own?
And
I
if you
look
do it
at
on your own, there's a little bit of an upcharge because even though this is speaking and professionalism on a cruise, it's a hand helping hand type of thing where you're not in necessarily a paid gig every time.
these positions are not paid. I have to pay an agent for the job, and that works on a cost per day. So if I've got a 7 day cruise, it's going to be a lot less than if I'm doing a 14-day cruise. But I pay the agent, and that's it. A lot of the cruise ships or cruise companies that I work with will pay my airfares to join and bring me home. Some of the uh, lesser type, the more economic, what they call 4-star cruise lines, such as Caribbean, Princess, P&O, and Dream Cruises, they expect you to pay your own airfares to join the cruise. So you've got to take that into account as well. It's definitely you're not going to make money on it.
Mhm.
Advantage is, yes, I do make contacts and I have done research for people from the contacts I've made on those cruise ships. So from that point of view, yes, it has helped my business whilst I've been enjoying myself, because you speak on days when the ship is at sea. You don't speak when it's in port because you'll have no people there. But the days when people are getting bored, when it's just cruising between one port and another, what they call sea days, that's when you're expected to speak. So you'll frequently, yeah, when you look at the listing of vacancies, it will say 13-day cruise /6. So you know that you've got to present on 6 of those days out of the 13. The rest of the time you're going to be in port.
How fun. Now, when you go
So
sign up for
yeah,
this, how do you find the agent or the listings?
all you've got to do is to Google cruise speaking, and various cruise companies will come up. Not so much the companies themselves, but the agencies who book the speakers to go on the cruises. And at the moment, I work with one particular agent here in the Southern Hemisphere. And so most of my cruises have been Southern Hemisphere ones. But I'm looking at diversifying a bit to see if I can get a few Northern Hemisphere cruises, because I'm a bit fed up with just going to New Zealand and back to Australia, etc. So I'd like to do a few more cruises. Occasionally, yeah, the cruises come up. Royal Caribbean, especially with Australia, they reposition twice a year. In the Australian summer, they'll be working the cruise ships down here. In the Australian winter, they're going up to the US summer and working Alaska. So you get those big cruises between Sydney and Honolulu, and you can be doing 12, 13 presentations because there's an awful lot of sea days. But you get, um, that's one of those things where you get a different generation of listeners, and I've had some really, yeah, great discoveries with the younger generation. On the last cruise I did to Honolulu, one young man came up and he said, "Look, well, he was young to me anyway, and, and he said, "Look, I don't know who my father is. I was one of the first people to under the artificial insemination program when it first started." He said, "And they didn't keep names of the donors." He
Oh,
said,
wow.
"I've been on to the hospital and they have no names. It was completely anonymous donorship." And he said, "I've done my DNA through Ancestry, and every hit I've got has been from my mum. And I've got nothing on my dad's side that I can relate to my dad's side." So we spoke about it, and I gave him some tips, etc., on what to do. And 2 days before the cruise finished, he came belting up and said, "Hey, I've just found a first cousin on my dad's side." So, yes, yeah, okay, you're on a cruise, and you don't expect to have those sort of discoveries on a cruise. And it was great. He was just so happy, and he was hoping to contact with this person. I said, "Well, oh, if they don't respond to your message, then look for them on social media, etc." Yeah, he said, "Might be a bit hard. The name's Smith."
Very
But he'd made that connection, and he'd got that connection, and he could work it from there.
wow.
So bits like that. Even on one Viking cruise I went on, the I had this 50% people wanting to do it, and the other 50% ain't interested. This lady turned up at each of the workshops, pushing her husband in a wheelchair. And at the end of the cruise, or my stage of the cruise, she came up and she said, "Look, I understand this is the last of your workshops." I said, "Yeah, that's right." She said, "I'd like to thank you." She said, "I came on this world cruise in the effort of trying to get my husband out of his despair. He was so depressed, having been put in a wheelchair." She said, "And I could not get him to involve in anything. He was just so depressed." And she said, "This was my last uh, effort at trying to motivate him that life wouldn't be too bad in a wheelchair." And she said, "I can't get him off the computer now. He is absolutely enthralled with family history." And she said, "I want to thank you for giving him the chance of life and a purpose in life." So sometimes it really hits you when that sort of thing happens. So yeah, it can be very rewarding
Mhm.
in what you do.
I think that's a really important part of it is that people don't realize how rewarding and fulfilling this job can be,
Mm,
whether it's one
yep,
that benefiting you because you get to go on a cruise, but
yep.
we get to pour into the lives of others. I think that's one of the most valuable reasons for doing this as a job. Um,
Mm,
One thing I wanted to note back to you to see if this makes sense, if I missed anything that you're saying, because we're running out of time today, and I wanted to ask you, so if you wanted to be a cruise speaker and you're a genealogist, you need to be fairly techy so that you can run your own equipment and understand how to use theirs. You need to understand the
absolutely.
space, the place, and the people that are going to be there. You need to have experience already as a professional speaker. You need to know what you're talking about and be prepared for the amount of presentations that you're going to give. And then, depending on the type of situation and people you have, you may also have the opportunity to network and gain future clients. I remember something you mentioned to me once before, and that was you're not allowed to necessarily promote, right? How did you handle that?
Mhm. Yep. You're not promoting yourself as such, although when I put up the examples of, say, a pedigree chart, I've usually got relative discoveries along the top as my version of the chart. But people do come up and say, do you take on work?" So the opportunities are there, and you can just weave it into your talks when you talk about, oh, I had a client who was looking for this. So that sort of the opportunities are there without actually promoting enormous banners, etc., across the screen saying this is my business. So I think the other thing you've got to have as well is what they say is fluent English.
Mm.
You've got to have fluent English, I guess, because of the demographics of that older type person who can't hear very well. You've got to be able to speak English nicely and clearly.
Do all cruises offer microphones, or are there times when you're using a stage voice?
Microphones are the norm. Yeah, they've usually just got the headpiece that you can put on. A couple of times I've had to use a handheld one, which it's okay. You get used to it. Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah,
get used to it though.
they're tough because if you're trying to change screens and work on things with your computer,
Yeah,
yeah,
balancing, juggling things.
yeah. But otherwise, I've done it too. I love the headset, but
Yeah,
yeah, sometimes
yeah.
you have to
You've got the
adjust.
factor as well. If it happens, yeah, this is a sea day and it could be a bit rough.
I could see you talking. Hello, so glad to be with you.
Exactly. I've done that before. I've had to sit during the presentation because the
Can't
sea
stand.
has been that rough. Yeah.
I will tell quick story just to entertain everyone out there. My husband and I went on a cruise. We were doing just kind of a short little 4-day cruise. And we play miniature golf with our family just for fun because it helps with all ages. Well, this particular cruise ship had a miniature golf course up on the top level. And it was between Seattle and Victoria. The winds were going and the ship was going and the ball was going. It was our most interesting miniature golf game ever because we couldn't figure out whether or not the ball had a mind of its own or what was going to happen and who was going to be able to get one in. So it was a pretty fun. So if you're not too worried about that, but there are other things you can do. If you're getting seasick or something, you can wear the wristbands. You can take a little bit of medication or
Most of
whatever.
the ships these days, the stabilizers are so good that you don't really notice. I think the worst one was when I was on a ship off of Norway and we had a storm in the North Sea and it
Oh,
was so rough that the captain actually stopped the lifts from working
oh
because
my!
it was too dangerous to even run the lifts.
So
So
you're supposed to.
that's the
It
worst I've been in.
was probably a hunker down in
Why
your.
do I love cruise ships?
Most have no trouble, but there's always the fun stories. I used to be a flight attendant, and one of the flights that I was on blew a tire through the engine. So hey, but here I am today to talk about it, right? And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think you do need to be aware that things are constantly going to be moving. Things are constantly going to be changing, and so is your space and place and people. And so I think it's really important that you be aware of that as well. Well, we're coming to the end, and I'd like to ask you, is there any big tips that we've missed? Anything you feel like is really important to share if somebody wants to be a cruise speaker?
I think it's yeah, if you're going to have a companion with you, make sure that you do get on because yes, the cruise ships are quite good with their speakers in their cabin. But I'm the next cruise I've got coming up. I will be going solo because I asked what the accommodation was, and they said it's probably bunk beds in crew accommodation. I thought what? So I can't imagine any of my companions wanting to get up on the top bunk.
I would not.
So so I tend to check my accommodation before I say yes or no.
I do understand too, the lower you are on the ship, the less movement you feel. And so that's
Yeah,
more toward the center of the
yeah,
ship.
it's not too bad. I've been on various parts of the ship, uh, both ends, in the middle, up, down. It doesn't seem to me it doesn't make any difference. I don't seem to have any problems. Yeah, there's a couple of times I've got some seasickness pills the type that you can take one. I take it the night if it looks a bit as it's going to be a bit rough. I'll take a pill before I go to bed, and it works overnight to quieten everything down so that during the day you're fine. And I only need to take that one, and then for the rest of the cruise, I'm fine,
That's a
regardless of what.
really good,
Yeah,
great tip.
yeah.
Um, there was another question I had for you, and it has to do with when you're booking with the agent, how far in advance do you book these cruises? I think that might be important for our folks to know.
It there again, it depends. At the start of what just for us, the cruise season is virtually October through to April.
Mhm.
And I think just before Christmas, the agent put up a list of over 100 different positions, but they're not all for genealogy speakers. You have to look for what they call enrichment speakers,
Oh, good tip.
because yeah, if it's there's history speakers, there's destination speakers, there's um, crafts, arts and crafts as well. So you've got to look for the enrichment speakers. And I looked on this morning, and that list is now down to 21, and there's only one enrichment speakers
Oh, good.
that's needed. So you've got to keep your eye on the lists, and anything you're interested in, you apply straight away, because otherwise, next time you look on the list a couple of days later, that might have gone.
Very good. So, just as a norm, what would be an average cost to say a 7-day cruise or a 2-week cruise for a genealogy speaker?
Hang on, I can just quickly look up the current listings.
Okay. And I think we'll close it for there. And then if
Okay,
folks have questions, they can always send a note over to Angie at genealogicalstudies.com. I'll make sure to get it to you. Or drop a note in the chat app on genealogicalstudies.com. It's down in the right-hand corner, comes right to us. There's always a real person answering. Although we do answer during business hours, we catch anything that's been left overnight the next day. And we do take Saturday, Sunday off to the best of our ability. What's your answer?
okay. The cruise ships, there's different grades of cruise ships. You've got 4, 5, and 6 are the grades. I'm classed as a grade 5, 6 speaker, which is the better class ships.
Woo!
So so it can be anything from I've got one here, Royal Caribbean, Tokyo to Singapore, 13, the cruise is 13 days long, 6 speaking gigs, and that's $910, and that includes air for the speaker.
Now, is that
You go
Australian
to,
dollars because you're in Australia, or is that
that's
in?
Australian dollars. Yeah, that's Australian dollars. So, and then one of the most expensive would be Viking Orion. This is way into January next year. Sydney to Auckland. This is a history speaker they're looking for. 14 days sailing, five five sea days, so 5 talks, $1,400.
Okay, hold on.
And
So in
yep,
US dollars, that's
yep,
$930 for a 14-day cruise, and you're giving about 5 hours of your time, but you've got
yep,
to do your prep work.
mm,
So you could at least do
yes,
probably at
oh
least five
yes.
hours ahead of that. So anywhere from 5 to 15 hours of work. And that cruise would probably normally cost in the, $4,000 to $6,000 for the lowest cabin, right? Yeah.
And that
So
would be per person. But yeah, the agent's fee is covering you and your companion for the cruise.
for that
Okay,
1,400 Australian covers both?
both of you.
Oh,
I'm the one paying the fee. The companion doesn't pay anything. All the companion has to do is to pay their own airfares to join me.
oh my glory. So
So
that to me sounds like it's a very valuable tool if you like travel and you like speaking about genealogy.
yeah, if husband and wife, Yeah, we do have another student who cruises with her husband. Her husband is the main speaker. She also does some speaking as well, and craft. And so, and they have just done virtually the whole of a world cruise. That's
Oh,
about 3 months
wow.
cruising.
I
Yeah.
cannot imagine. I've never had the kind of time to be able to do that.
Mm,
But
mm,
that's,
yeah.
I've spoken all over the place, but not on a cruise
Mm,
ship. So this was such a
mm.
fun interview to do with you, Brenda. Thank you so much. And I think it will enrich the lives of our students and those that might be interested in being a cruise speaker. Thank you for being
Well,
with
for
us.
anyone, yeah, for anyone who loves cruising, it's ideal.
Oh, I
Mm.
think it's awesome. This is Brenda Wheeler. She is one of our professors at the International Institute of Genealogical Studies. My name's Angela Breidenbach. I'm an author, speaker, professional genealogist, and the executive director of the International Institute of Genealogical Studies, found at genealogicalstudies.com. Come see us. We might have a class for you. Thank you, Brenda.